All right, welcome back to Vietnam, part two. Military advantages and disadvantages. First, for the U.S., we had better technology. Second, more supplies. If you look at the picture on the right, what is a piece of technology that you see? This totally revolutionizes how we do war. Hey, I hope I am back. My wife stopped by to say hi to me. You can see a piece of technology that had a great change. That is the helicopter. We used it both for troop transportation, taking out wounded soldiers, and also as offensive. Next thing we had was more supplies, weapons, ammo, types of weapons, medical supplies, food rations, all of those things. The Viet Cong, they got by on eating like a jungle rat and a tube of rice. It was horrifying. Vietnamese, though, had some advantages over us that definitely made a difference. One, they were fighting on familiar land. Second, they had the jungle to go back and hide into. There's a rule of thumb that if you're fighting in a war and one of the side has any kind of forest nature to hide into, it's very, very hard to beat them. And second, they could ambush us and then blend into the people. We stuck out and they did not. All right, now hawks versus doves. The hawks, they are for war. The name really basically suggests that. Hawks kill things. They want war. They basically thought we cannot let communism win. Because if you let communism win, then another country would follow after that. That is called the domino theory. Write that down. Domino theory. You let one country follow the communism, bam! Knocks the next country over. Doves are against it. Peace. All right? Doves, peace. These are people that are against the war. One, they thought loss of American lives. Two, cost way, 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 way too much. Roughly $20 billion a year. Now, there were people who protested the war. This morphed into a thing known as the counterculture movement against kind of like basically the norm of society at that time. Rock and roll was one of the biggest expressions of that. In San Francisco, in this area known as the Haight-Ashbury, they had what was called the Summer of Love, 1967. Janis Joplin, the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, all of them smoking a whole bunch of pot, dropping a lot of LSD, and just being like, peace, dude. 1967, they had a protest where they marched on Washington. They surrounded the Pentagon. They burnt their draft cards. They did sit-ins around government buildings. The draft we'll get into in a later activity, but basically you were given a number. All men still have to basically get it when they turn 18. And if the number is taken, you go to war and have to join the military. Biggest kind of uprising, though, came at the 1968 Democrat Convention in Chicago, and it was basically a riot. The protesters just broke out crazy and wanted to protest our involvement in the Vietnam War. Now, wait one. Now, these protesters, one of the it's kind of came after it, but it's still seen as the pinnacle of it, is Woodstock, where 400,000 kids came and they were dropping in and dropping out. That is a reference to taking a hallucinogenic drug. Up here to the right, you can see the picture of Woodstock, the bandstand, the whole entire crowd that's there. Martin Luther King, he spoke out against the war. Muhammad Ali refuses to become drafted. One of the most bravest actions I've ever heard about an athlete taking, standing up for his principles like that. Lost his title belts that he had at the time, I believe 5 years. And then, of course, 1969, we got Woodstock. hippies, they revolt against the materialism of the 1950s. They had communes, drugs, peace, all of that mumbo jumbo. Now, take a moment and examine these images from the Vietnam War. If you look at the one on the left-hand side, this is a Saigon police officer executing a Viet Cong in public. This image, one of the American newspaper journalists captured and was put into the press. This shocked American people. Where's the due process of law? Summary executions is not what we are about. On the other side, we have urban fighting, and this was some of the most vicious, nastiest, horrifying things. If you ever get a chance, watch what's that movie? Hold on, I have to look it up. All right, I can't believe I forgot the name of that movie. It was one of my favorite Vietnam War movies ever. Full Metal Jacket. I can't tell you to watch it because it is pretty graphic and it's rated R, but it is a very, very good movie. All right, now, 1968, Nixon becomes the president. So he's president from 69 to 74. We'll get into how he gets out of being the president and everything like that. It's not the best in America ever. Henry Kissinger is his Secretary of State, very brilliant chess player in the international politics. And basically both of these guys said America had to redefine its role. So they create the Nixon Doctrine, and basically says America cannot defend all free nations from communism. Before this, we had the Truman Doctrine, which said we would defend every free nation from communism. Has to switch around. Nixon's a little bit of a pragmaticist there. And this gives us a justification for pulling out of Vietnam. Now, you got Kissinger. He did it a roundabout way. Basically, he said that Nixon is going to use his communist fighting credentials to get more relations with communists. Because Nixon is seen as being non-communist, he can reach out to them more. Does a visit to China, think ping pong diplomacy, brilliant. Increases our trade with them. We recognize mainland China instead of the small island of Taiwan. Then Nixon goes and visits the USSR, where it leads to a détente, a lessening of tensions. And we say, let's have slightly less nuclear weapons, which is a good thing, and he uses that as the way to get people doing different stuff. This eventually leads for U.S. talks for a ceasefire between North Vietnam and us, not South Vietnam. Okay, that is a big key. March 1973, the war ends for us. We still keep our American embassy in Saigon. Some of the last pictures of people leaving that is very, very dramatic. Helicopters leaving off the roof of the building. But we eventually get out of it. We just spent too long in the war. If you think about our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, some of the similarities are very, very much there. These are wars that could go on and on and on. And Nixon was like, we just got to cut the tie and get out. Now, the Vietnam balance sheet. First off, 58,000 Americans were killed. This, for the amount of time we were there, the number of soldiers who were there, goes to show how much we've improved the armor, the medicine that people could get. This keeps playing out in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've had lots of casualties, but because of the medicine that we've put in there and innovated, there's been less deaths. 300,000 though are women, which is a significant amount. And at this time we had flak jackets on, and those would stop the serious injuries that would cause life, but people would lose their legs, would lose their arms, would have injuries to their lower spine where they weren't able to move. Very, very heart-wrenching to the American conscience. The total cost is $150 billion. Here's the part that we had a change as a country. We criticized the soldiers when they came home. Not everybody did it, but soldiers felt they weren't welcome. One, they didn't come back as units. They came back when their deployment was done in small groups or individually, and so they did not have any celebrations for the service that they got, and it greatly affected them. People were haunted by it. They had no parades. We also decided we had to put a limit on presidential powers of going to war. Created the War Powers Act. Can't send in U.S. forces for longer than 60 days without congressional approval. Here's something to think about, though, for the 60-day things. If we send in troops and Congress doesn't approve it, what could the president say back to Congress to make them be like, oh, you should really do it? And one of the things that they do nowadays is, oh, you're not supporting the troops, which leads to Congress almost always rubber stamping what the president wants to do. Also a change in the Cold War. And this eventually leads into the 80s to, the eventual dissolution of the Soviet Union. But we're no longer like actively fighting communism around the world. And we actually, in the 80s, pull a little bit of what the Soviet Union and China did in Vietnam against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And this ended our policy of containment, where we are not trying to stop the spread of communism. And that is that. Have a good day.